I'm sure you've heard the adage that there's more that's caught than taught. And with technology and how our kids are using it, new studies are pointing out that that is incredibly true. But is our rhythm with tech really just a rhythm that our kids pick up from us? Or do we have a responsibility to also teach and say what things should be used for? Can our instruction supersede our model for our kids? We're going to talk about this next in the Celebrate Kids podcast in this daily segment, Facing the Dark. Before we jump into it, I just want to remind you that these episodes are brought to you by Summit Ministries. Summit Ministries is an integral partner with Celebrate Kids. Dr. Kathy just finished a session with a Summit summer session in Manitou Springs, Colorado. If you go on our social media account, you'll see the bright, smiling faces. But these aren't just faces that are smiling because they like Dr. Kathy. They're smiling because they're getting an understanding of the world, and adult experts in different fields are helping kids gain an incredible perspective on how God's word actually informs the real world. Dr. Kathy is one of the key speakers and speaks at nearly every summit session throughout the course of the summer. Specifically, there's 2 sessions that are open still that we want to make sure that you know about. One of the sessions is in the middle of summer. It's in Lookout Mountain, Georgia at Covenant College. The other one is in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and that's at the end of the summer. And we really want to encourage you, if you're looking for a summer program for your kids where they will get an incredible explanation of the world from God's perspective, while also having a ton of fun with a bunch of other teens and college-age kids, then you should visit summitministries.org/celebrate kids. Again, that's summitministries.org/celebrate kids. Use the code celebrate24 at checkout to get a special discount from us. Now let's turn to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, parenting strategies and screen use among young adolescents is really a hot topic. Strategies are abound. I mean, there are plenty, and success seems to be really elusive for many families. In a recent study of more than 10,000 12 to 13-year-olds and their parents, they were asked what their screen habits were, including texting and social media video chats, video watching, and browsing the internet. The researchers also asked whether the kids and the parents thought that their screen use was problematic. For example, whether kids really wanted to quit using screens because they felt like their screen habits interfered with school or work or daily life. One key finding that jumped out of the research is that one of the biggest predictors of how much time kids spend on their screens and whether they think that that screen use is problematic is how much their parents themselves use their screens when they're around their kids. Now, Dr. Kathy, you've written really extensively about this. You wrote a whole book on this topic, Screens and Teens, which I felt was a little bit mistitled because I felt like you were talking to me. It was more of like a, Wayne, this is how you're misusing technology in your home and what you need to do to fix that. I felt like you were kind of in my back pocket and you were writing a book specifically to me. Why is a parent's model for screen usage so integral to how kids perceive technology and really how kids use technology, even in a healthy format?
You know, in every way, parents model things to children, and it's always been relevant, right? So we shouldn't be surprised that a parent's use of technology influence a child's beliefs about technology and what's good or not good about it. It is what it is. Kids watch. I like to say that children are like wet cement and everything makes an impression. And they're watching. And because technology is new, like when you first hand a child a device and you allow them to watch a video or play some developmentally age-appropriate app to learn the ABCs, they've never seen this device before. So how are they going to figure out, to swipe or to push a button? By watching a mom and a dad do so. We should not be surprised by this.
Yeah, Dr. Kathy, I do think that there's something to that, to watching and kind of understanding the model. I don't know if it's exactly the same, though, in many ways. I mean, my kids watch me drive and they might model it at home, but they don't model it with a level of expertise, right? I think that developing technologies really are developed for what we call kind of usability. And I know that you've really talked a lot about this concept that there is some things that are caught. We have this famous phrase, more is caught than taught. But recently I heard you say something that really made me question or challenge that idea a little bit in my mind. because you talked about the need to actually teach our kids that while we think that many things are modeled for them, there also are some things that they don't just pick up, but they actually hear us talk about them. They need our teaching. Why do you think we need to do maybe more teaching or have a teaching posture than just even like a modeling posture for our kids?
Our good friend Courtney Kreitz likes to say that children observe everything, but don't interpret everything well. And I think we have to remember that their eyes and ears are open and they are watching because they're curious and they love their parents for the most part and maybe want to become like them. They play school or house like, a mom and dad are playing house, but they don't interpret things. And that would certainly be true with technology. They are swiping and pushing buttons and maybe not even understanding what they're doing. They just saw an older brother even, right? Their siblings are huge, important role models here of what can be caught. So, but we can't assume that they understand it. We can't assume that they, of course, see the dangers in it by simply watching a mom and dad use it. So then we have to teach because there's addiction here. So we have to teach proper use. We have to make sure that they put it away and that they play outside and that they color a coloring book and that they help mom in the kitchen and help dad, sweep out the garage. And I think that one of the most important things to teach would be the difference between want and need. I'm not sure that that's going to be picked up by kids observing their parents. So we believe this at the ministry that technology is here to stay. So let's use it well. And we train children to understand that, normally we don't allow any devices at the dinner table. But if, your older sister has a chance for a babysitting job because the neighbor might need to run an errand and doesn't want to take the kids out at night, then she gets to keep the phone on at the dinner table because there's kind of an emergency. And maybe the dad gets to keep a phone on at the dinner table because he might have to take a quick business trip because his boss wasn't feeling well earlier that day. So we have to teach those things and explain so that our words are meeting the needs that our children have. And I think too, when we have the conversation, Wayne, we give kids permission to ask questions. Mom, why are you doing that? Mom, why did you just pick up your phone again? And then mom has to explain, and that's good for the mom and good for the kid.
How do you get your kids to that place where they do ask those questions? Or maybe my bigger question is, how do we teach our kids? I think sometimes we kind of assume that parents have this understanding, but there might be a reality. I would even say for myself that sometimes as we engage our kids, we might not understand what it really looks like to have a teaching posture versus maybe like a telling posture or a instructing posture, right? How do we, what should our posture be? And what advice or insight would you give to us as parents on how we can better teach our kids?
I love that question because teaching, there's just more words, so people have to slow down and parents have to increase patience and parents have to understand that we're teaching for the big picture. If I teach and train my children once really well, there'll have to be some review and some reteaching, but it won't be as often as if I simply tell them what to do. They'll keep coming back and saying, Daddy, now what do I do? So one of the things that we've been talking about here at the ministry is that you teach like a reporter thinks. And this is in my new book about Parent Differently with Biblical Character. So what is it and what isn't it? This is a proper use of a phone. This is not proper use. You compare and you contrast. And then when and where does this rule, like, is this a rule or is this a principle? Is this a suggestion? Is this my opinion or is this my standard in the home? And does it apply to a phone, to an iPad, to a computer? Does it apply to YouTube videos or websites? Does it apply to Junior and the other kids in the family? So when and where do we use it? And how do we use it? This is the how it's turned on and how it's turned off. Do you know how many kids don't know how to turn off a device? They don't even know they can be turned off. I remember back in the day when you had to turn your phone off on an airplane or you had to turn your phone into an airplane mode. How many people did not know that it was possible to turn a phone off? And then most importantly, Wayne, what if we suggested that teaching the why behind the what is really important? Why would we use a phone? And why wouldn't we? When is walking next door to our neighbor better than texting our neighbor to ask how she's feeling today? So why do we do it? Why do we watch a YouTube video when we might have a book on the shelf that would teach us the same thing? Why would we watch a YouTube video about gardening when our grandmother is a brilliant gardener and we could invite her over to teach us in person? I think that's critically important.
Man, I love that. I love so much about, that teaching that you just gave us on teaching. And I never thought that I'd like that. But I mean, there's books on how to read books and I like those too. So I guess it kind of fits the mold there. But I wanted to ask you a question kind of as we close here. because I feel like there's so much of what you just talked about has to do a lot with what you also write about in Screens and Teens, at least what jumped out to me in the book Screens and Teens, just about the reality of relationships and how really understanding how things relate to each other really puts us in a great place of understanding how we're then called to engage it or lead with it or guide it. And I wanted to ask you this question. Why are relationships so integral to how we look at and use and even perceive technology? And also, what advice would you give to us as parents on how we can enhance then our relationship with our kids to better guide them in some different uses of tech, knowing that this is oftentimes a hot button issue for many of us?
I appreciate that. So yeah, relationships, everything that we do here at the Ministry of Celebrate Kids, I think is designed to facilitate healthy relationships, give and take relationships where, the parent speaks and the kids listen and the kids speak and the parents listen. And the parents teach and the kids are taught, and sometimes the children teach and the parents are taught. It's the most important relationship of all, right? It's why I'm so broken. I just 30 minutes ago, before we recorded, had a conversation with a colleague I respect greatly about a young woman who is struggling, and it just breaks my heart that her parents don't care. The family is ordained by the Lord. It is significant, and children should care what we think. So, do we like them? Do we love them? Do we have integrity and credibility in our relationship? Do we walk toward them and get to know their likes? Do we support them? Are we their advocates? Do we, compliment them and correct them in love, because that's what we're called to do, is mature them in their faith? Are we there in the everyday, and are we there on the special days? Oh my goodness, it matters so much. And because technology is such a technology can have such a negative effect on relationships, it's more critical than maybe most things that we talk about it, because kids can stay in their bedrooms and text their mom, when's dinner going to be ready? And there's a convenience to that, I suppose, if the child is focused on playing in the dollhouse or focused on homework, and she can just shoot a quick text and doesn't have to leave the room and walk down the hall and ask the mom and get distracted and then go back and forget where she was on her homework assignment. But no, we should be into the relationship.
As Dr. Kathy was talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Genesis chapter 48, and I'll begin reading at verse 14. But Israel reached out his hand and put it on Ephraim's head. Though he was younger and crossing his arms, he put his left hand on Manasseh's head, even though Manasseh was the firstborn. And then he blessed Joseph, saying, "May the God whom my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, walked faithfully, the God who has been my shepherd all the days of my life, the angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. May they be called by my name, and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they increase greatly on the earth." I think this passage is incredible, partly because there's incredible teaching that goes along with what's happening here. There's a call to the reality that Abraham and Isaac walked faithfully with God. That expression for these young men really helps them get an understanding that this modeling that they saw happen before them was something that also they should replicate and really carry. But specifically what happens with this special blessing is the teaching that goes on here. The teaching that there is a God in all of the earth who greatly blesses people who really replicate and honor and serve and worship him. And I wonder if we pull back and really assess how we're stepping into different things like technology management or even family management, and talk to our kids about the people that have gone before us and the people that we want to model and the people that we want to celebrate, but we do it in such a way that teaches them. I wonder if that could be a bright light that really gives them guidance and casts incredible vision for their path that God has them on right now. As we close, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Celebrate Kids podcast, the daily segment Facing the Dark. I want to encourage you, really, you should check out Summit Ministries. Just go to summitministries.org/celebrate kids. They're a big sponsor of what we do here every week. And their summer camps are things that your kids would really benefit from. My family has really grown and benefited from the ministry of Summit Ministries, and my kids have loved their summer camps and have had big questions answered for them and have gotten resources that have really helped walk them through some dark and challenging times in our culture. Again, visit summitministries.org/celebrate kids. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook, my name is Wayne Stender. Thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.